Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone's afternoon coming along so far?
Good.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to be here today to be moderating this session around account-based marketing, convergence of AI and data. Account-based marketing is the biggest buzz in sales and marketing, B2B sales and marketing organizations right now. Account-based marketing is considered to be the next generation of marketing. But conceptually, account-based marketing has been a concept that's been around for decades, where sales organizations are working with account lists and marketing teams are feeding into those sales organizations with leads. In fact, inbound marketing was the biggest buzz in the mid-2000s, where marketing teams would work to do different kinds of tactics and campaigns to generate leads and feed them down the funnel to their sales organizations. But there's always been some kind of discrepancies in terms of how marketing was feeding those leads into sales. With the advancements of technologies, with the marketing technology landscape, in fact, is one of the fastest growing landscapes in the industries. In 2011, there was probably about 150 different vendors in Martech, and in 2018, I believe there's over 6,800 vendors in technology. So that's an amazing opportunity for marketers to be able to think about leveraging data, to be able to leveraging data for actionable insights, and then leveraging technologies. And then, of course, this day and age, you have to think about how you can have the right content at the right time to the right audience, leveraging personalization. So with that, I'd like to introduce the panel today. And we have a great panel. The panel spans from small companies to large companies, starting with Ajit Deshpande from Salesforce, VP of Marketing. We have Karen Steele, CMO of LeanData, Maria Pergolino, from CMO of Anaplan, and we also have Randi Barshack, CMO of Figure 8. And I can probably say that 3 out of the 4 women are women in my panel, so exciting. So I'd like to start with asking each panel about what do they think about ABM and what makes it so great and how they're currently using it. So I'd like to start with Randi.
Oh no, you're starting with me. I'm going to start off with a controversial statement. It drives me crazy, actually, the term ABM, because it's so like the hot term of the day. So actually, whenever anybody uses the term ABM in my organization, I say, "You mean targeted accounts?" And we say yes, because it has been around forever. It's just the buzzword aspect of it is new. Now, that being said, as we get more into the conversation, I think there are more advanced tools that can help you move along. But it's really the concept of, rather than waiting with your fishing rod for whatever fish to come swimming up to your bait, that you are proactively going after specific named accounts with primarily an enterprise sales force, and that you're taking more proactive tactics that might be more ad hoc or might be more systematic. But essentially, it's that you've got named accounts that fit certain characteristics, one of which might simply be they're on the short list of your enterprise salespeople, and you go after them rather than wait for them to come inbound to you.
Ajit?
I think in one manner of speaking, can you guys hear me? So one manner of speaking, you could think of all marketing as ABM. So in the traditional sort of legacy marketing approaches that we had, you essentially did spray and pray. So you kind of blanketed the world with a lot of marketing initiatives, and you got outcomes and leads and form completes and whatnot from some of the people that revealed themselves. When it comes to ABM, I think there's a few things that have happened in recent times around the availability of data, number one, and then beyond that, our ability to actually segment that information and be able to engage with the information and the data that we actually want to engage with. And I think ABM is, in that sense, a manifestation of that aspect. So if you think of it, you have your high-touch target accounts that you really want to get. These might be large enterprise accounts. And then you have sort of the middle of the pack, which is your programmatic ABM targets, where you probably want to go after, call it 10,000 different companies that probably fit your bill, but you don't really want to go high touch on them. That's also ABM. So ABM in that sense is something that can be applied to pretty much everything that we do. And then the other aspect of it, looking at ABM a little bit from a different dimension, is ABM is in many ways a strategy where you start from, to Randy's point, segmenting your population down to the population that you really want, and then from then on figuring out what tactics are best to engage with them, what people in those accounts are best to engage with, and then based on the outputs and the responses that you get from those people on how you now optimize and update your strategy to do it better the next time. So ABM in that sense represents this whole rinse and repeat and this whole continually updating process to make your marketing more and more efficient.
Great. Good afternoon. I agree with everything that's been said. And to add on to what Randy said about the term, I sort of have the same issue with AI. It feels like the next big data thing. But I think we should really focus on account-based technology because it's just as important for the marketer as it is for the seller. And everything that's been said, it is about target accounts. And it's about B2B companies thinking about who are the most important companies that are going to bring the most business, however they define that. And it's typically based on ideal customer profiles. So it's a way to target accounts that are going to be the most meaningful, targets for your business. Typically, people are not doing just ABM in the B2B world. I think we'll come around to that question, but it's absolutely happening. It's been around for a while, but technology's made it a lot more efficient.
Good afternoon. When I started my career about 20 years ago, it was in an area that I think we'd call today field marketing. I worked in a business unit of a chemical company. There was lots of competitions, and we did a lot of engagement within our current customers, prospects, and today we would call all of that work ABM. And so when you think about it, this is not new marketing, and just like my peers said, but as my career evolved and as things like the internet became more prevalent, we had new channels that we never had before. First, even PPC and being able to put content out on the web for people to find as they needed it. Social media, all of those were emerging, and marketers rushed to learn to how to leverage them. On Twitter, you would find me at Inbound Marketing, which you talked about when we started, Avi, was something that I thought was going to drastically change not just that time, but my entire career, and it did. It has not gone away, but what we've added back in is we've refocused and created a balance across our marketing and said, there's places where we want to do great inbound marketing and have people come to us and find that content or find what they need when they're looking. And then there's times that we have to educate people. And so I think it's about a balance. And what we're really doing, I love this time in marketing because I think you can be a great marketer that balances brand and pipe and balances different techniques, inbound and ABM. And I think that creates for a great marketing mix, a term we don't use very much anymore. But I think a decade or two ago, we talked about a lot. And I think as you think about your marketing, it's what is that right mix? And I don't think that there is one way.
Great. All of you touched on tech in your responses. I noticed that everyone mentioned tech. And this day and age, marketing now has a seat on the revenue table. We marketers are now accountable for revenue. The metrics that we traditionally looked at were click-through rates, clicks, and impressions. But now there's more deep funnel metrics that marketing is now accountable for. So, what are some of the key deep funnel metrics that, as a marketer, we should be thinking about that are tied to seeing the return on investment on these techs? Ajit, do you want to?
Yeah. I think the metrics question is pretty open-ended, I'd say, and a lot of it is driven by the context and the goal in there. But one of the things that we've seen as Salesforce has transitioned more and more into the ABM thought process as far as marketing is really it goes down to this question on whether ABM is a strategy or a tactic. And from our standpoint, we think of it as a strategy, which means really if you have a target set of accounts, number one, can you get to those target lists of accounts? And there's sort of some segmentation involved in there. But once you have them, there's questions around what is sales going to do as far as engaging with them, and what is marketing going to do as far as engaging with them. And so it's not really a marketing paradigm per se. And so depending on what the orchestration feels like, where who should do the touch, whether it's sales or marketing, depending on sort of the touch that happens, the key metrics are around whether those touches are successful. So when it comes to ABM, the things that we track are everything from calls made by salespeople to connects made by salespeople to the meetings that they book. And then on the marketing side, when we are reaching out to them, it becomes then a collection of tactics. And then are those tactics resulting it in the conversions that we are looking for? So I would say conversion is a key metric, but just looked at in a variety of different lenses. That's number one. And then sort of the underlying thing that drives all ABM approaches within Salesforce is this concept of marketing contribution. So when we do events versus when we do online campaigns versus when we have inbound interest, the basic thing for us is to be able to compare apples and oranges. So is an event touch better than an online touch for a given segment or a given industry or a given location? And then we sort of at this point quantify every one of those touches to give dollar credit to those touches. That credit giving element then enables us to look at our ABM strategy, which is then a collection of marketing tactics and touches, and then compare those tactics against each other as far as which ones have worked for the audiences that we are looking for. So I would say the metrics are still very much connected to the funnel as far as what sales is doing and what marketing is doing. It's just the way we look at those metrics is evolving. So it's not so much about lead volume. It's not so much about pipeline. It's more about influence. It's about how are we engaging and hopefully getting the propensity of the prospect to improve so that we can win them as a customer. So that propensity is key, and it is baselined across pretty much every touch that we do across sales and marketing.
Maria, do you have any additional thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think similar. The metric that becomes least relevant is new names, right? You're not looking at your database and saying how many people came into our funnel because you already know who those people should be. It's then what is that engagement with those people? So making sure first that the accounts that you know that you want to sell to, that you know who in those accounts, first, do you know who those accounts are? Who in those accounts do you want to sell to? And then what type of engagement is happening within those accounts? And you can do very similar to what you said, looking at each of the different events or social, whatever it is that whatever channel you're engaging with. But ultimately what you're trying to do is get some measure of, is there now activity within that account? Are people listening? And what you're trying to do is understand who are the people that need to listen, and when does that cause for someone to then, essentially buy your product. And so we then move to things like deal acceleration metrics, and ultimately all of this can be leveraged not just for new accounts, but accounts that you've already sold to as you look to upsell or cross-sell. And so you're also applying all of these metrics to your current customer and all of your install base as well.
Yeah, and the last piece I would add, I agree with what the entire panel has said. It is, I think, ultimately it's about account engagement because it is about target accounts. But I think one of the things you have to look at very carefully when you're defining your go-to-market is connecting those accounts and the way those touches happen in those accounts with the right sellers. Because you've got to make sure you've got the right distribution if it's upsell business or cross-sell business versus a new target account. And so, the data becomes a little tricky because you have to have new data for new accounts in your CRM system. Then you've got to connect all the right data to the right sellers. And so getting the data right is a pretty important point before you can even begin to look at the kind of analytics we've been talking about. And then wholeheartedly agree on the attribution piece. I think that's where we want to get to with any kind of target account marketing.
And I just want to add to that. I think probably the most valuable piece of data we're still not capturing, which is in that discovery call or that clincher meeting, the rep has the ability, or oftentimes is hearing, you know what really put us over the edge was that webinar we attended, or when one of our largest accounts actually saw a billboard, we had a 101, and that was like the clincher, right? So I think we forget that even in B2B selling, emotion does factor into it. They saw you at a trade show and you just had a great presence, and that gave them the emotional confidence to kind of put you over a competitor or decide that they needed you. So I actually feel like the anecdotal evidence is out there. And I have a note from, we're kind of working on the ROI attribution thing now, and that, God, is there a way we can really discipline the sales force to figure out? Because the answer is usually, if you have to pick one thing, and I agree, it's not one thing anymore. It's all the touches. But if I sit in one more meeting where we're debating is it the first touch or the last touch? I'm hoping those days are behind us, and we're really looking at all the touches, and not the first touch, last touch, but the whole picture.
Definitely agreed that multi-touch attribution is very important to be able to measure, especially when you have long sales cycles and you want to be able to see contribution in terms of what marketing has done and how that feeds into the engine. Another thing that all of you were bringing up was things that are correlated to accounts, which means having a lot of interactions with your sales organizations. What is the value of having the alignment with your sales organization, and how important is that?
I mean, just jumping in, when we think about, if you're sitting here trying to understand, why, if this account selling and working with those named accounts is important, why would we even bring marketing into the mix? Why wouldn't we just hire more sellers? Any direct sales, if you're B2B, marketing should create an efficiency in the front. So that brand, the reason we invest in brand, the reason we invest in pipeline building strategies outside of direct selling is because you get an efficiency by doing it in some repeatable in some way in volume, right? That one to many creates efficiency. And so I think that the marketing is very important in combination with the sales. And I think sometimes we don't remember that. And so when we're trying to figure out how much do we put in marketing and how much do we put in sales, looking for that efficiency, looking for some way to quantify that versus the sales team, I think is very important, just as to kick off the question.
Yeah, and just to pick up what Maria mentioned, which I totally agree with, ABM in some ways started in the field marketing world many, many years ago. And field marketing is still incredibly potent today and incredibly important. You want those teams to be doing targeted events with your target accounts and bring people together. So I think the partnership today with marketing and sales needs more alignment than ever, not less. Even with all the efficiency we have with technology, both marketing automation tools as well as the CRM system. So I think it's critical. And having that common understanding of the ideal customer profile, and are we hitting that, and have we gotten that right in aligning the accounts and making sure sales and marketing are having those conversations.
I think sorry, go ahead.
No, so I think when we talk about partnership, the ultimate partnership is when you say, here's, a minimally viable marketing team, and here's a minimally viable either SDR or BDR organization. And then there's this extra bucket of money, and real partnership is, where do we invest that? How can we look at that collectively and decide what's more beneficial, going to 12 more trade shows or 12 more SDRs in the organization? And that's where the attribution is really important. You have to really be able to look at it, to partner with your sales leader as a marketing leader and say, is it better to have, somebody pinging people on LinkedIn and sending them outbound mails, or is it better to do something more systematically? So I think there's even a higher level of partnership. The other thing is, I do think ABM's a great opportunity, particularly for higher level enterprise sales reps to just build a partnership. It's amazing how marketing programs that sales are on board with do much better. Isn't that a coincidence? So I think when you say, here's what we're going to do for your targeted accounts, and I before ABM, I would call them grease the skids campaigns. And it could be, anything from, you find out someone had a baby and you send them a onesie, right? To you're going to a trade show and they're going to be there and you set up a meeting. I think when you just by nature, ABM's going to endear yourself more to sales because it's much more aligned to their model of we're going after these accounts versus we're going to sit here and wait for them to come in.
So just sort of the Salesforce view on it from call it a larger company perspective out here. I've been at Salesforce now 4 years. When I started, our revenue was around $3 to $4 billion. Last year it was $10+ billion. This year it's going to be 12+. So we've kind of tripled in about 4 years, call it, right? And what I've seen as being part of the marketing team during that time is a lot of our traditional tactics have hit saturation. So you really cannot just keep mailing people, and you just really cannot just keep using Google SEM and all of the traditional things. And on the flip side, we've had a very strong sales organization. I could call it Salesforce, but I'll call it sales org. The sales organization is also at the point where all of the new logos that they could get have been acquired. So now it's a question of add-on business or going after some really, really new areas, industries, segments, regions, and so on. As we get there, both sides are realizing that it is critical to partner because otherwise ROI on both sides is going to be very bad. And ABM allows us to do that and make that a true partnership. So that's sort of the value of ABM for us. And then the second piece of it is correspondingly, since both sides are investing on the one side in sales programs that allow us to engage effectively, and on our side in ABM, it sort of allows us to get more ROI out of the system, which is a requirement because as a company grows bigger and bigger, early on Wall Street doesn't care, but when you get to sort of the Salesforce scale, you have to show operating margin leverage. You have to show things that are just evolutionary aspects. So if you continue 20-30% growth as Salesforce has been doing, you have to get all of these benefits of scale that are driven by things like ABM, that are driven by the need for sales and marketing to partner, and that kind of saves jobs on both sides for us, and then also allow us to get what goals we need to achieve.
So you mentioned that traditional tactics like paid search or just doing emails may not be as impactful. So that's kind of the convergence of thinking about the innovation of technology. So looking at Forrester had an article that mentioned that 70% of companies are thinking about leveraging AI for marketing and for their technologies. So that means 2 out of 3 companies are thinking about how to be more innovative using tech to do outbound. So what are some influences of AI-based technologies that you have found impactful in your current mix?
So I'll start. We're a smaller company than some of the other folks up here, but I think one of the areas it's going to be highly impactful, and we're looking at a bunch of technology right now, is in the conversational AI world, removing the landing page and getting people to interact with a human being, like we were actually seeing with the human and the machine in the demo from IBM Watson. So conversational AI, I think, Drift and Hushly and some other tools that are out there, they're in Conversica doing some very good stuff in that space.
Yeah, I think if you're looking for, I think all of us know and understand that there's going to be impact from AI, but we're trying to figure out how to apply it in a cost-efficient and effective way, something that's going to ease pressure and tension, things that are going to make our jobs easier. A simple way that we have done that, we've brought together essentially 2 tools, Engagio and Everstring. Engagio is doing, we use it for, just one simple way to use it is finding out who those named accounts should be and then prioritizing them, right? So I think if we look at companies that are above 500 million in revenue. I think globally we're looking at about 40,000 companies. On average, I think they have about 8,000 employees. We were trying to figure out is which of those, maybe 40,000, if you're focused on enterprise, let's say, which of those 40,000 are important to you, and that's where a technology like Everstring can prioritize for you based on the sales that you've had. We then, so let's just hypothetically say, then they say, okay, well, within that 40,000, we think there's 6,000. You may not then have the sales team to focus on 6,000 at a time. And so then what we're using is behavioral data to then say, so we've used the predictive, the AI to figure out which are the accounts, but then looking at the behavior of what people have done, who's come to your website, who's taken a call, to prioritize within those accounts. And so there's just one very simple use case that now I don't have to go and I can recommend to my sales team who their named accounts should be. I can focus very simply using two tools that are pretty plug and play to make sure I can actually do ABM. And so there's a simple use case for AI that's been very relevant for us.
Yes. So ABM and AI broadly, when it comes to the use of all the data that we have, it has basically allowed us to really update and change our business model, in short. And to propound a little bit more on it, today, given the availability of the data and also the advent of AI, we today score every one of our accounts, especially in sort of the mid-market and small business world. We score every one of our accounts in terms of their propensity to become a customer. And if they're already a customer, then we score those accounts on their propensity to buy a second product or a third product, and so on. So we have account scoring in place, which is all done based on our internal data. Within each account, we today score every individual contact in that account in terms of who the contact should be that we reach out to. And so we kind of have that scoring in place. So when we are going after an account, then we kind of know the top 3 contacts that we should try to go after mathematically in order to get the best outcomes. We sort of also have combined every engagement that prospects and individuals have with the company, whether it's through user groups or through the buying decision-making process or through their tweeting around Salesforce or any other mechanism, we sort of have combined it all to now score their activity levels as far as we are concerned. So we've kind of been able to collect a lot of signals as far as you go top down from saying, hey, this is the segment or industry I want to go target, and therein this is the list of accounts, then therein who are the people I should go after, and then which are the people that I could just influence and nudge across so that they can amplify the message that the company has. So as we think of AI, it's kind of been far-reaching for us. Beyond that, it's been when I say it's changing our business model. When you think of the company, every company as it evolves goes from selling small deals to selling larger deals. So if a deal was $1,000 5 years ago, now the deal is $5,000. That sort of moves the needle, and salespeople move towards the larger deals. So who fills the gap for the smaller deals so that no smaller company comes in and eats your breakfast? Marketing has to fill that gap, and AI allows us to fill that gap just because we now can leverage technology to get that done. And sort of as we go up market from a sales standpoint, marketing is filling the gap at Salesforce in the down market space through influencer marketing, through aspects that are cost effective yet equally impactful. And all of that is because of the fact that we have the data and the AI and the models that allow us to figure out who to go after. So it's been just impactful to the last extent, and all of that has kind of happened in the last 2 to 3 years for us.
So I'm going to eat this question up because who was it that said AI? Was it you that said the AI buzzword?
I did.
Oh, you.
Yeah.
So we're in the AI space. So we sell to people in the AI space. I love it. So I'm all about AI. So there's two things. So we have a very horizontal view of the AI space. We sell to everybody from people working on autonomous vehicles to drone technology to marketing-based AI. And the more quote unquote off the shelf examples that we see from a marketing perspective are two that you touched on, the conversational agents. So the algorithms are fairly mature there, and it's just a matter of getting your unique training data sets to power the agents, as well as more in the B2C space. But sentiment analysis is also fairly mature. So being able to analyze the social media channels to see what's being, both what the sentiment is about your brand or your company online, as well as sort of what's behind that. In terms of what we're using at Figure 8, because we're selling into the AI space and selling primarily to data scientists, what we find is it's a fairly nascent market, and company to company, the user changes or the buyer changes. So we've been mining a lot of data on things like LinkedIn to see everything from the age and gender of a typical user to what groups might they belong to, what kind of universities did they study, what are the degrees that we're seeing. So we're using that to sort of build the profile of our market and understand our audience better, because we're in such a nascent, emerging, evolving market.
Great. That's very, very helpful to understand that it seems like all of you guys have a very sophisticated maturity model in terms of tech, in terms of processes, in terms of how you measure data. But what advice would you give to someone, a marketer, that has constraints in their budget, time, and resources, and really wants to launch ABM? What are some things that they should be thinking about to kind of kickstart their ABM programs?
You're not budget constrained.
Yeah, I was going to say the Salesforce guy should go
You
first.
can't say anything.
But I used to be in venture capital many years ago, so I kind of completely appreciate that line of thought. But let me just start by saying when a company sort of evolves, a company doesn't really need marketing. So at the very beginning, there is no need for marketing, right? You make product market fit and all that happen, and then you start using some marketing, and then you scale marketing, and then you realize that marketing ROI is not as bad, and then it kind of starts getting optimized, and then it shrinks just because of performance pressure, right? So that's the evolution of marketing across the startup life cycle, so to speak. The way I look at it is at whichever stage one is, the basic construct of ABM is still applicable, which means segmentation, going after the accounts that you need, is critical, because whether it's hand-to-hand combat to get your first customer, or whether it's getting your 100 customers that you really want in a certain, you are going after a niche, and you're kind of doing it through sort of the ABM principles. The basic driver for all of this is the availability of information and data. So the one thing I would say is, number one, the need to store as much information as you can for every engagement that you do have, even if you really don't have a complete philosophy in place. That is critical, because you can always look back and optimize based off what happens. So that's the one thing where even I've seen at Salesforce, as we evolve, we kind of don't have the building blocks that we really need into the future. So that's one piece for us that sort of we've seen. And then the other aspect, as far as going after an ABM thought process, is to sort of build it bottom up, which means the entire bucket of tactics doesn't need to be used. Probably the top 2 or 3 would be enough in early stage. And then you sort of add more and more that allow you to blanket and cover your prospects in a better way. So a bottom-up philosophy is super key, and a segmentation approach to every action is extremely important for ABM sort of, or just marketing to scale. And then eventually you will hit saturation on certain things and diminishing returns, and then you'll want to back off from certain things. But that would be one way to look at it.
I think any marketing technology, whether it's Salesforce automation, whether it's marketing automation, the technology gives you the ability to scale what was brute force. So one of the rules I have is you have to map it out in a spreadsheet first and make sure that's the process you need, versus somebody that goes and buys the tool and then maps their process to the tool. That's the wrong way to do it. So actually, because I tend to be at smaller, scrappier companies, I always start with an intern and Excel. And same thing for ABM. $15 an hour, you get brute force, whether, again, it's mailing custom packages out or researching something on LinkedIn and building the profile. And then it's a pain in the ass, but you keep track of it in Excel, right? And you figure it out and get your metrics there. And then you realize, okay, this is more than one intern can handle or two interns can handle. And then that's when you're ready to go buy the package. So we're actually right now in the process of implementing an ABM package because we've been doing it with brute force and interns. We're confident now in the return and we want to scale it. But that's kind of where I believe you can start with for $15 an hour in Excel, whatever your Excel license cost is.
And I would just say, really simply, get your ICP right and get sales to agree what is your ideal customer profile, because that's the place where you start and that's what you build all the data off of for your named accounts. So I think that's really critical, and then get the buy-in with the sales team. But get started. I mean, if you're a B2B company, you should be looking at ABM, and it should be part of your marketing mix somewhere in the equation.
At the company I work for, Anaplan, the CEO came from Cisco, and we use a tool that I believe they used called a VSEM, which is Vision, Strategy, I think it's in execution and metrics. And I think you need to know those things. You need to know what you're trying to achieve, what you're going to try to execute, and then how you're going to measure it, and whether that's small or large. I think, your marketing's not going to feel successful if you don't know what you're trying to get to and what you're expecting and being reasonable. I think the other piece there is that I'm pretty close with a lot of the CMOs that are companies of similar size, and what is something that is just so powerful to me is that all of us take a very different approach, and it is not that you don't have to do everything. There's not one way. And so I think choose the things that you're going to do in marketing and do them just particularly well. It is okay if you're not doing PPC, but you have just a great blog that is attracting people, or if you're getting the ABM part right, but your digital's not as strong. Like, as you're getting started, just don't try to dilute everything by doing everything. Choose a couple things to be particularly well at. Companies then, as they scale, I think really focus in on this, and this is for the brands that I've worked for, this has been a really important part. So it's, just try to pick a few things, a few channels, a few assets, and just really leverage them the best that you can.
Okay, great. Well, I'm done with my questions. Do we have any questions from the audience? We have time for one or two questions. Can you come to the mic? There's a mic on each end of the room.
Hey guys, hi Maria. Alok, somebody just mentioned, I think Maria, you mentioned about channel selection. Is there AI that's being used for mix optimization? Are there tools out there that people have found useful? Or is it still seat of the pants, what works, and you manually figure out which channels is doing better?
I'm not using anything for mix selection, but what I do try to do is group. So if you're doing things for ABM, typically your metrics around deal acceleration or that engagement. And so I try to group like programs so I can compare and see, hey, is this compared to the other things, is this working better or worse? And then that's how I choose how to increase spend in a particular area. Similar with, like I would group things like PPC and social media and the things that are inbound. I group those together, things that are for new names and lead, and so that events would be in there so that I can compare their return. And I'm just optimizing that way. And again, I think you're right. It starts in an Excel sheet if that's where you're starting, and then can grow into systems, but making sure you're grouping like tactics so that you can compare and optimize your mix.
Thanks.
Excellent. All right. One more question.
Hey, I just wanted to know about your thoughts on the ABM marketplace itself. As you know, it's pretty fragmented now. There are some people upfront who basically give you the data, a way to score the prospects, then orchestration tools like Engagio in which you can make plays, and then actually taking actions and measuring the full life cycle. as people who are implementing this, do you think it's too complicated and fragmented? Do you think this is all going to merge? And organizationally, are you having dedicated functions for each of these things, or you just have one team working on all of it?
So I definitely think we're going to end up with a couple of ABM platforms. You mentioned the orchestration piece. I also think the data piece is another one. There are platforms, there are products out there doing the advertising side right now of ABM. I think those will be rolled into some of the broader channel platforms, but I definitely think ABM technology as a whole, we're going to see a consolidation.
And I think that applies kind of to marketing technology in general. Marketing, I think just because of the persona of the CMO needs space and speed, and they will take the best solution that they see in order to get the objectives that they need, and that allows for startups to get their first $500,000, $2 million in revenue, right? But eventually, the best platforms emerge, and so I think consolidation is the name of the game. Whether it's Engagio and a lot of its competitors or any others, there is going to be consolidation everywhere. I think from our standpoint, we kind of, it is super important to have customer references for the vendor that you're working with. And if you feel like it's a strong, dedicated team that is willing to get to the next level, it is a team to work with, and then it's also after that point, it's also in your best interest to make sure that they survive and do really well, right? So sort of, I think it's a pretty good virtuous cycle once you've figured out the right vendor to work with.
Excellent. Well, thank you for great insight from the panel, and thank you from the TiE Inflect team.